Hello and welcome to Building a Software as a Service application with Rails. This is episode number 11 and today we're going to add projects to our application. Now these are going to be projects that have a client and that you can add time entries to. Okay, let's get started. Before I get started here, I'm going to do a few items of housekeeping. The first thing I'm going to do is bump up to a higher version of the apartment gem. This fixes a little bug that I was running into involving migrations. The next thing I'm going to do is add the names of our subdomains as our tenant names in apartment. So what this is going to do is give us all of the names of our schemas so they can be migrated when we migrate the database. And to do this, we'll just go ahead and pluck all of the subdomains, which is just going to do a select from the accounts table of only the subdomain field. Put it into an array for us. After that, I'll just go ahead and run bundle here to get that all set up. After running bundle, I'm going to go ahead and drop the database, recreate it, and re-migrate it because of the issue I was having with apartment. You may or may not need to do this. If you want to be safe, just go ahead and do it. After that, I'm going to run rake db test prepare to get our test database all up and ready to go. After that, a quick run of the tests shows that everything's still passing. As I said in this episode, I would like to expand the project functionality and allow users to create projects. So the first thing I'm going to do is run the Rails model generator to create a project model. And I'm going to give it the attributes name, client, and archived, which is going to be a Boolean. After that, I'm going to open up the migration, and I'm just going to specify that the archived field cannot be null, and it defaults to false. Then I'll just run rake db migrate and db test prepare. With our model created, I'm going to get to work on the project model spec. For our validations, I'll go ahead and validate the presence and uniqueness of name, and I'll also validate the presence of client. We don't have any associations for now. And then I also want to include this last test, which just makes sure that the archive defaults to false. So it's just going to create a new project and make sure that the project is not archived. After that, I can run the tests and I'll see that they are not passing. So I'll jump into my project model, add the presence and uniqueness validations for name, and the presence validation for client, which by the way is just going to be a client name. And then after that, I can see that all my tests are now passing. So now let's build out the project interface a bit. I'm going to add some routes for projects in the subdomain present constraint. I'm going to add all of the routes except show and destroy. I'm going to build out some very standard actions for our projects controller. In the index action, I'm just going to set a project's instance variable to all of the projects. I'm going to create a new action that is just going to set a new project instance variable. And I'm going to create a create action, which will create a project based on the params, and if the project successfully saves, it'll redirect back to the project's path and say that the project was created. If not, it's going to render the new template with the errors. After that, I'll just create the project params. This is using strong parameters, and I'll require the project, and I will permit the name, client, and archived attributes. Next up, I'll go ahead and create a project's new template, so new.html.erb. And in here, I'm just going to put a pretty standard centered bootstrap panel for our form. And I'll just give it a title of new project, and then I'll render a form partial, which I'm going to create next. Then I'm going to create the form partial that I just mentioned. I'm just going to paste this in. We're gonna use simple form. Remember, we'll have to specify this wrapper mapping so that we get the styling for Bootstrap right. We're going to have a name, a client, and an archived input. The archived input is only going to be there if the project has been saved previously. Pretty standard. We have a submit button as well. Opening this up in the browser, I can navigate to the project's new path. And I see the form that we created to create a new project. I'll go ahead and fill in some details. Now I can see that the post is created, but we're not displaying it anywhere. So let's create a little interface to also display our projects on this page. First thing I'm going to do is add a link to the header so we can more easily create a new project. This is just going to be a simple link, and it's going to link to the new project path. After that, I'm going to edit the project's index template. I'm going to remove what we have since it's just a placeholder, and I'm going to paste in some HTML to get us set up. We're going to loop through each project. We're going to list the project name and the client, and then we are going to have some links for editing the project and adding time entries to the project. We have some icons for those. The time entry one will not be a link yet since we don't have that functionality set up, but we can go ahead and link to the edit project path. After that, we'll have a list group for our time entries, and we're just going to put that there are no entries yet since, again, we don't have that functionality yet. Now when I refresh the page, I see my test projects that I've created, and I see a link here to create a new project. I also have a link to edit these projects, which is going to break right now because we haven't implemented that. And also I have a space here for adding the actual time entries. Now is a good time to go back and write some tests around project creation. So what I'm going to do is create a new file called projects feature spec, and I'm going to borrow some of the setup from the invitations feature spec so we can get started. I'm going to first write a scenario about allowing test projects to be created. So we'll visit the root path, we'll click new project, we'll fill in the name and client. We'll expect that archived is not there since it only is displayed on persisted projects. And we'll click new project, and then we'll assert that we have the text that we expect. I'm going to write a quick test about the project validations, the form validations. So this is almost just a sanity test. So I'll visit the root path, I'll create a new project, and then I'll click the create project button. And I'll expect that we have some text in there that says can't be blank, just to make sure that our validations are working. A run of the tests shows that everything's passing. Just as a reminder, you should always make sure you watch your tests fail at least once so that you make sure that they're actually testing something, but I've done that in the background. Next up, I'm going to tackle the project editing spec, so I'll copy down the project creation spec, and I'm going to add a macro called click edit project button, and then I'll provide the project name that we want to edit. I'll fill in the name with a new name so we can see if it changed, and I'll also check the archived button. This won't do anything now, but it'll just make sure that it appears here, and we'll leave that as is for now. Then we'll click the update button, and we'll expect that we see that the text that we think will appear. Next up, I'm going to create this click edit project button method. Whenever you have an action that you need to perform in Capybara and it's sort of complicated or you think it might change frequently, it's a good idea to separate it out into its own method so that you can just update it quickly if the CSS or something changes. So that's what we'll do here. A run of the test shows that we have no method named project. So I'm going to use Factory Girl to create a project for us so we can use it for this spec. So I'll just add that line in here, and then I'm going to fix up the project factory, which was created for us when we generated the model. I'm going to specify a sequence for the name, since we're validating the uniqueness of the name, and that'll just give us a numbered project name. And then I'll fix up the client text as well. I'll go ahead and rerun the tests again, and I can see that there is no edit action for the projects controller, so we can go ahead and add that now. In my projects controller, I'm just going to come up with some very standard edit and update actions. For the edit action, I'm just going to find the project and pass it down to the view. For the update action, I'm going to find the project, update the attributes. If the update is successful, I'll go ahead and redirect to the project's path. Otherwise, I'll just render the form. Running the test shows that we need to introduce the edit template. Now the edit template's going to essentially be exactly the same as the new template. So I'll just copy that over, and then I'll just update, then I'll just change the wording a bit. This time I'll run all of the tests, and I can see that everything is now passing. I would like to just make one more tweak here to the routes. What I usually tend to try and keep as few routes as possible, so that kind of cuts down the noise. What I'm going to do is eliminate the project's index path, because we really don't need it. The root of our project is, in fact, the project's index path. So I'll go ahead and add that to the accept option here, and then I will update the references to projects path to root path. Finally, I'm just going to add some styling to the typography file here. Okay, back in the browser, I can see that my edit button is now working. I can go ahead and edit the project title. And I can see that the project was updated, and I can see that the changes are reflected here on this page. I think that's about it for this episode. Next time we'll go into adding our actual time entries. Thanks for watching.